Before I start this video, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to those of you who watched, commented, liked, and even messaged me privately after watching the last video that I posted about the existential crisis that I was and am currently facing. Having to put yourself on the internet in and of itself is a scary thing, but having to put yourself on the internet where you are basically exposing yourself to the raw emotions that you're feeling, where you're putting yourself in a really vulnerable state, is a whole different ballpark of scary. And the amount and love that I got from everyone who watched that video has been incredible, and I just wanted to say a huge thank you. Now that I've said that, let's talk about today's video. Hi everyone, my name is 𝐂𝐕𝐴𝐷𝐈𝐀. Welcome to my channel if you are new here, and welcome back to my channel if you are a family, friend, or lovely subscriber. In today's video, I'm going to be discussing with you some of the habits that I actually do to put myself in a positive mindset when I'm feeling not all that great. Bear in mind that the habits that I'm going to be sharing with you are from a very informal list. It is in no particular order, and it is what works for me, so take from it what you will. The first thing that I want to mention that works for me is reframing my mindset from the what to the why. So I realize that when I get into a negative state of mind, I have a strong tendency to ask myself what questions. So for example, what am I doing with my life? What are my values? What are my hobbies? What am I doing with this country? And so on. So instead, what I try and do when I get into that state is to ask myself why questions. So why am I choosing to do this? Why am I in this job? Why am I in this country? I think there is merit in asking yourself why questions to realign yourself with your purpose and what your values actually are. And in doing so, I'm actually shifting my mindset and redirecting my attention to intentionally do things that align with my purpose and align with what I am most motivated to do. So the second habit that I do is I have a dedicated rant time. So I'm an emotional person, I can say that. So usually my partner Alex will pick me up from work, and once we actually get into his car, we usually have a window of between 15 to 30 minutes before we actually get to my house, where he usually drops me off. And in that time, we actually use that particular time of 15 to 30 minutes to actually just like rant and talk about anything, any issues that we had throughout our day, any difficulties that we faced. And basically it is just an allotted rant time where we just get anything negative that we had faced throughout the day, we just get it off of our chest in that 15 to 30 minutes. So depending on the situation, how we're feeling, sometimes we need support, sometimes we discuss strategies, and once we actually have that 15 to 30 minutes where we actually get to rant about whatever it is that we needed to, we try to get all of that negativity off of our chest so that when we actually enter the house, we feel a lot more positive and a lot more light now that we've actually had that dedicated rant time. And I think having to chunk all of that rant time in 15 to 30 minutes actually means that we just have it all like condensed, and we try and do it before we actually enter the house, so that once we actually do enter the house, we come into the house in a much more positive state of mind. And that's not to say that throughout the night that we won't actually come into a point where we feel like ranting again, especially if it's something that's really bothered us throughout the day. And in that sense, what I usually do is I usually tell myself, okay, you know what, for the next 5 to 10 minutes, I need to rant again. And once that's done, I usually tell Alex, okay, I'm cutting it off because I want to go do something else. I don't want to spend the rest of my evening ranting about this. And yeah, it kind of helps you to sort of condense all of that frustration and anger that you are facing throughout the day into a small allotted amount of time. And I tell myself that once that time has passed, that's it. I don't want to talk about it anymore, and that helps. So the third action or habit that I have is I have a comfort starter. I don't know if this is a term that has been used, if it exists at all, or if it's something that I read somewhere and I just can't remember where I read it from. But I have a comfort starter, and the two comfort starters that I have are actually right behind me. I've got a scented candle which smells like caramel popcorn, and I have a cup of Malaysian tea. So I find that at the end of the day, when I want to try and get myself into a more positive mind state, where I want to try and remind myself to be a little bit more mindful, I actually have a comfort starter where it's sort of, in a way, is a physical reminder that I should be taking care of myself. And once I actually make myself a cup of tea, or once I actually start lighting a scented candle, it sort of reminds me that this is a time that is for me. Once I've actually lit the candle, once I've made myself a cup of tea, I usually try not to get on my phone, I try not to get on social media, or I try not to get onto my laptop or watch any TV. It's just a moment just for myself to, in a way, refocus on the senses that I've got. So for example, drinking a cup of tea, I'm focusing on the taste of really good Malaysian tea. Once I actually light a candle, I'm focusing on the smells and the look of a lighted candle, because I find a lighted candle gives me such comfort to look at as well. But yeah, so I don't know what your comfort starter would be. It would be different for everyone, but for me, it's a candle and it is a cup of tea. The fourth habit or action is to create or innovate with a passion project. I would consider myself to be a fairly creative person. I really enjoy being creative. It puts me into a state where I'm allowed to be free. There's no rules. It gets me out of my head and I can think a little bit outside of the box and draw outside of the lines, and that really appeals to me. So this could be different for everyone. For some people, it could be painting, it could be drawing, it could be writing, it could be making videos on YouTube, whatever the case may be. When I get to focus on my passion projects, such as doing YouTube or working on my book, I'm in a much happier state of mind because I'm focusing on not on anything that I have to do throughout the day, nothing that's related to my job, but very much everything that has to do with me, my hobbies, and what I actually enjoy doing. So the next one is actually limiting social media in the evenings. So if you watched my last video on having an existential crisis, I actually discussed sort of the dangers of social media, where people will often use it as somewhat of a measurement stick for success. So people will look at social media as a way of assessing where you are in your life and whether you are where you're supposed to be. And we see, basically what people are up to in terms of, what job they've got, whether or not they're engaged or married, whether or not they've got a house. And I feel like in that sense, we tend to try and assess ourselves against somebody else's lives, and it's not fair on us to have to do that. I find that sometimes I get into a rabbit hole in social media and it's not healthy whatsoever. So in that sense, I try to limit my social media in the evenings. I will go on it for maybe 15-20 minutes max. Usually I'll just check and see some of my friends' stories, and I will usually respond to messages during that time. But once I've actually done that, I usually don't try and get on social media. I usually try and limit that for during the day, and then during the night it's usually more reserved for me. So yeah, that's usually what I do, is try and limit my social media use in the evenings. The next habit I have is writing. So for some people, this may be journaling or keeping a diary. For me, it is writing poetry. My mom or my dad gifted me a book of poetry when I was 8, and ever since then, it's just been a way for me to actually express my emotions. It's actually a form of catharsis for me. I actually get to express all of the excess emotions I've been feeling. It always used to be a thing for me that I could only write when I used to be really upset, but now I also write when I'm really happy. So in a way, I've sort of figured out that I think it's a way for me to deal with my excess emotion. That's the way that I kind of view it, because in a way I do feel that I am an emotional person, and sometimes my emotions are too much for me to handle, and being able to write and translate some of my emotions into poetry is my way of basically curbing my emotions and turning it into art. So being able to keep a diary or a journal, or in my case, writing poetry, will help you to, in a way, increase your emotional intelligence and your emotional self-awareness. And you are able to keep track of your emotions and translate what it is that you're feeling into writing. And in that sense, you can assess how it is that you're feeling and what you need to do to make yourself feel better. On the topic of writing, the next habit that I have is practicing the art of gratitude. So people who have watched my channel will know that I am such a fan of the 5-minute journal. It is one of my favorite things that I have ever been gifted by my friend Ariel. So essentially the journal forces me to write down 3 things that I'm grateful for in the morning. The reason why I say that you should practice the art of gratitude is because it really sometimes it requires a lot of practice to do it. I have so many things in my life that I am grateful for. I've got my family, I've got really good friends, I'm in a stable country, in a stable earning job, but sometimes I wake up and it's difficult to think about what it is that I'm grateful for. But having to put yourself in the practice of doing that regularly, in my case doing it in the morning, and I also do that weekly as well, because the diary that I've got at the moment, where I actually write down all my appointments and things like that, actually also has a section for gratitude as well, where you actually have to write down 3 things that you're grateful for every single week. Practicing the art of gratitude is great because it shifts my mindset from one of scarcity to one of abundance, and it forces me to redirect my attention from, maybe the things that are not going so great in my life to what is going great in my life and what I'm actually really positive about. The next habit is to move your body in a way that is joyful to you. So the reason why I say that is because I feel like exercise is different for everybody and what they enjoy. For me personally, I like being in a state of serenity or being in a state of complete just joy. So for me, the best way to move my body in a way that is joyful to me would either be swimming or having to dance. So it really depends what I'm feeling in that day. Sometimes I need a little bit more serenity. I need a little bit more calm around me. So in that sense, I will usually drag Alex down to the local pool, where I just basically just immerse myself in the water. Especially when you're going swimming as well and you're going underwater, it sort of deprives you of a lot of your senses, and it's really calming in a way, because when I'm underwater, I almost put myself in a little bit of a bubble where I'm focused just on what is in front of me, what is around me, what I can hear, which is basically nothing really. And there is something really nice about sensory deprivation. I used to think that would freak me out, but actually when I'm underwater, when I can't listen to anything, when I don't actually necessarily have to see anything, if I'm just floating there, it's really calming and it's really serene. But then again, when I have days where I just really want to dance, that is also really joyful for me, because it gets me out of my head. I don't really think so much about what it is that I'm doing. There's no technique to my movements. I'm just doing what makes me feel good and what makes me feel happy. The next point that I've got here in my notes, is build a soundtrack for your moods. So I have a playlist for different moods that I'm facing, but I've got one specific playlist that is something that I put on when I want to put myself in a positive mind state. I think that music is such a powerful thing. It puts me in such a great mood when I've got a really great playlist going on. So for me, I've got a playlist which is called IDK Cool Rock ? And it's basically a playlist that's just full of rock music from the 80s and the 90s. It's a lot of David Bowie, a lot of Queen, a lot of AC/DC, just that kind of music. It just really peps me up and puts me in a really good state of mind. If you don't have a playlist, a peppy or pick-me-up playlist, I would highly encourage you to go create one and let that just be your soundtrack to when you actually want to try and pep yourself up. But also, in saying that, sometimes you don't really want a peppy soundtrack to put you in that kind of mood. Sometimes you want a really positive but serene and calm soundtrack, and I also have a playlist for that as well. So I would say go build a soundtrack based on the kind of mood that you want to put yourself in. For me, I've got one that is basically positive, calm, and then I've got one that is positive, energetic. So yeah, go build a soundtrack based on your moods, and yeah, have fun with it. The last point that I have here on my notes is to surround yourself with loved ones. Sometimes, as much as I try and self-soothe and try and put myself into that positive mindset on my own, sometimes I myself am not enough. And having to ask people for help or support or comfort is really scary. I really struggle doing that at times, but when I actually do put myself into that situation around people who love me and support me and make me feel like my best self, I come out of those situations feeling so much better, so much more connected with people around me, because when you're in a negative state sometimes, you really tend to almost feel isolated, as if nobody can understand you, that nobody wants to. But once you actually surround yourself with people who do care for you and want to support you and give you the kind of love and care that you want to receive, you come out of those situations feeling so much more better that you actually reached out to people, and you feel much more connected to them. And in that sense, you feel as if you've got people around you who are your cheerleaders, but also people who really want to be there for your growth and self-development and will push you in that direction as well. If you are in a state where you aren't able to self-soothe, I would then turn to your loved ones and surround yourself with people who make you feel positive and happy and more like yourself. So those are all of the habits that I wanted to share with you today. If any of these habits resonated with you, especially if it's something that you've done before or considered doing, I would love to know in the comments below. I have such an affinity and love for the people who watch my videos. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I hope you would consider doing so and give this video a thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching my video, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.